So a few weeks ago, I made a post on my community tab asking for your questions and comments on what defines a motorcycle restoration versus a recommissioning or even a revival. Now, the goal of this video is to help you guys determine what the differences are between these terms and even help you guys decide maybe which option best suits your needs. So let's dive in. Now, a lot of you guys left some really great questions and comments, but some of you wrote pure poetry. From Mars Rover 001, restoration equals mint. Refurbishment, if you squint, it's mint. So let's talk about what it means to actually restore something. So Steve Dorian 6348 says, in my view, a restoration is getting the bike back to as near showroom condition as possible. Old new stock where necessary, respray, new decals, etc. A refurbishment being no less work, but maybe polish and rattle can lead. Use aftermarket parts needed. Generally speaking, a restoration will be far more expensive and time consuming than refurbishment. Refurbishment, motto, near enough is good enough, in my opinion. So I think Steve hit the nail on the head with this one, and it seems like a lot of you guys agree. This bike, as an example, 72Z1, low production number, perfectly restored. So the goal here is to take the bike and get it to as close to factory, if not maybe even a little bit better as possible. So a lot of times you're going to be after using OEM parts or NOS stuff or restoring the parts that are on the bike. And I think a lot of you guys agree. So some top-level restorations will even go as far as, say, recreating the paint marks from the assembly line as somebody marked off completing a certain job. So there are varying levels to a restoration, but I think the consensus is out there that it's as it left the factory. Now back to this Z for an example. I mean, the engine is rebuilt. We can see everything is polished. We have new and or replated hardware. Everything is as it would have left the factory. This thing is gorgeous. The paint is fantastic. All of the plastic is very vibrant. All of the chrome is nice. So this is just a very top level bike, and it's really cool to have it here in the shop. Now on the other end of the spectrum, I have what we like to call revivals. So MeTune 3092 has a definition. Restoration brings the bike all the way back to factory equipped condition. Reviving pulls the bike out of the depths of darkness and cobwebs and gets the bike back up to running condition for the street. Now, a lot of times it really seems like we are dragging these bikes from the grave and trying to breathe new life into them. You know, we have a lot of fun doing this, and overall it's a great test of our skills. So we've done revivals of bikes in junkyards in just 48 hours. We've also done revivals of bikes that came out of barns. And even recently, we did a revival on location where we got a bike going and even rode it home. Now, this can even be a controversial topic, as from the outside, it may appear that we lack the skills to work to a high level, or even that we're somehow neglecting the machines since we aren't restoring them. Now, to paraphrase another comment, here's at Brian Wilson 4386 with his take on the matter. And then you have the YouTube will it run setting, which to me is just that. You get the bike to start after years, or possibly after something bad has happened to it, and maybe you ride it around in a controlled environment without it being necessarily road legal. So we really like to see if these machines can live again just for the sake of it. As an example, with my 750 here, perfection was not the goal. Now this Triumph here is a 1972 T100R Daytona. I bought this with a group of 7 other bikes. I showcased it in that video, but I've never made any content on getting it going just because I wanted to enjoy it myself. So this bike was a revival. I've done kind of just the minimal amount of work to get it going. So I have rebuilt the carburetors, replaced the fuel taps, fuel lines. I think I did the left side cover on it. Change of fluids, of course, clean the rust out of the tank, you know, some basic stuff. But overall, this bike is very original, and it is a survivor, as I would like to call it. So like if you come over here, you can see the tank has like scratches and stuff, messed up paint. You know, the plating is a little chipped up. Nothing is perfect on this, but overall, this bike tells a story, and I would hate to get rid of that. So with this bike, I want to keep it exactly as it is because I love the way it looks. It is a little bit more historically significant, so I don't want to take away any of that history that it has. So beyond a cleaning, I really don't want to do about anything to it. Now, Jason Corneliuson echoes this saying, as much as I appreciate fully restored bikes, I prefer survivors. Original paint, even with some scuffs, it's only new once. Now this is where we get into the gray area, which is the term recommissioning, and this is the area that falls between a revival and a full restoration. So for this, I feel like Jeff says it best. Jeff Palmer, 1979, says, restoration, as close to as possible the way it was the day when it was sold new. Recommissioning, revival. Running and riding as close to new as possible while still wearing with pride the life that it has lived. Now this 74 Z1 is a great example. We've made some videos on bringing this bike back to life and it really presents well. I think we struck a nice balance of making it mechanically sound and safe to ride, yet we didn't get rid of any of the history or the character that this bike has. So this particular bike does belong to a customer and it is sentimental to them because it was their late father's. So for us to get rid of any scratches or dings or imperfections would be to eliminate the history of them having been here, you know? It may have been just a piece of sheet metal, but that dent or scratch is tied to a memory or experience of some sort, so I'd hate to get rid of that. Now, as I've said, this bike presents well, but it's not perfect because it wasn't the goal. You can see we have chipping paint on the caliper. The fork legs are a little bit dull. We do have new chrome pipes, new chrome rims and stuff like that, but we do have oxidation on the aluminum. So all of that is not stuff you would see on a fully restored bike like this one. Now, another bike that we did recently was a beautiful candy gold CB750 with a similar story as the Z1. We made these bikes roadworthy so they can continue to be experienced and make new memories. The focus is to be mechanically sound. So this seems to be where Seth and I love to work. Now, we both appreciate a perfectly restored machine, but I think we love the personal history attached to these machines even more. My 75 CB750 falls best into this category as I wanted to have a reliable, well-sorted vintage rider. I've been through this bike mechanically to both preserve it, but also make it as functional as possible. Now, my biggest goal was actually to preserve this bike's patina, which is why this thing's called Patty, as it tells a story. As the saying goes, chrome don't get you home. Now, with any of these three options, there are some other considerations to take into account. So here's some other great questions and comments that I've got. From Wade Bourdreau, my question for you, sir, is when do you feel it's acceptable to modify a bike versus refining or restoring? So that's a great question. Right in front of us, we have the Benelli 750C and a 79 CBX. So both of these are inline six bikes. They're both rare, but they are different in the overall goal. So this one, it's a 79 model. It's the first year they made it. It was actually in really solid shape. So this one we're doing a full-blown restoration on because it hasn't really been modified outside of a little bit of paint. So that's why we're on this project and that's why we're taking so long to do it. The Benelli, on the other hand, this thing has already been modified. So it's had different pegs welded on. It didn't have any of the body work on it. The wiring had been modified. So this is the ideal candidate for me to do a custom build on because it's not too nice where I worry about messing it up. I'm not worried about the value of it because this is for me. So fully restored, it might bring like 30K or something like that on the very, very, very high end. It's just not worth doing that to me. So another consideration that I make would be too original to restore. So this Triumph as an example, I talked about the history of it. If we were to restore this bike, it would be just like every other fully restored Triumph out there. It would be cool, but it wouldn't be this bike. So this is something I want to preserve and not restore. Now the same approach can be said for our VTR 250 here. So eventually we'll have a second video on this thing, but this is an 88 model. It has 11 miles on it, okay? We're not restoring it because it's not deteriorated. We're just getting it back together and making it present well. So we're gonna be preserving this thing as a time capsule. So we don't need to really do anything outside of just making sure it stays nice. Now, believe it or not, there are some bikes that are too rough to even think about reviving or restoring. So again, a VTR 250 that we have is this one over here. So this came out of a junkyard and it's just a glorified parts bike at this point. So it's not something we want to put a lot of time into, even though we might in the future, you never know. But right now it's just a parts bike. It's not worth even trying to make run again because there are going to be some costs associated with just sourcing what it's missing. So another example might be Seth's JR80 back here. So this is a glorified parts bike. Not worth putting a lot of money into, but he can use the frame to replace the frame on his other DS80 because that thing is a noodle. So another good comment that I got comes from Bearday Mutt 9731. Sorry. And he says, or they say, could one argue that in order to recommission an older motorcycle, is it okay to use more modern components due to a lack of decent condition used or new old stock OEM parts? Or are motorcycle guys as prissy about this as car guys are? To help answer that question, I have another comment, and this one comes from Alan Peg 3112. Restoration, you need deep pockets and to be prepared to be disappointed. Someone will always find that one thing that's not 100% perfect and that'll piss you off. So my question is, what is your opinion on aftermarket chrome tin wear versus now very expensive re-chrome? So we had a CX500 in here recently that had just 100 miles on it, okay? Bike was immaculate, as you would expect. Now the CX500 crowd, for some reason the purists in there seem to be very picky about if you modify those bikes because they say they're very valuable. Well, that 100-mile CX500 is probably a $5,000 bike, and it is what it is. Some bikes, it seems like there are a lot of purists for. I can totally understand wanting to keep a Z1 original, but a CB750 like this, you know, they made a ton of them. This is not a super early production number bike or anything like that, so I don't feel bad modifying it and making it my own as I have been. Now, another good example, kind of getting back to that OEM parts versus, let's say, more modern upgrades would be with the CBX here. So these things were like the first 100 horsepower bikes to be made, and they have the teeniest little single piston caliper brakes on them, which are terribly underpowered for this thing. So I have some dual piston calipers that would technically fit on this, but do I put them on there? It would be an upgrade. It would still be Honda, but it wouldn't be perfectly factory original. So what do you think? So another example of OEM parts versus aftermarket parts would be for the Z1. So right here we have a lovely, very religious, holy stock Z exhaust pipe. So that's unfortunately not something that I can save, and finding a new old stock or very good example of an original part online is just super expensive. So luckily, both of these bikes are sporting a aftermarket exhaust system that mimics the original. Now it looks good, the fit and finish is good, and so it gives you that ability to have the original look to it, the original sound, but it's not gonna, you know, it's gonna cost you an arm and a leg, let's be honest here, but it's not gonna cost you 2 arms and 2 legs. Now, over here is another CB750. This one is a 78 model that belongs to a customer, and obviously we are down to the frame on it, but we're not really calling this one a restoration just because of the nature of some of the work. So we do have a little bit more of a defined direction on that bike, but another CB750, because we have plenty, would be this gold one that we got out of Iowa. So this was supposed to be one of our barn find revivals, and it didn't work out. So now we have a project here that we're a little unsure of the direction on. So the expense to fully restore this thing back to what it was from the factory would be quite high compared to what it is worth. So not really the best route for us. But at the same time, it is early enough and complete enough to where I don't really want to go and modify it. So we're kind of stuck at a crossroads as far as what direction to take this CB750 right now, but we are working on it. Now, a new addition to the channel is my Nighthawk 700S. So this thing is awesome, and my goals for it are to be more of a daily, and I want to kind of resto mod it. So I am modifying this thing a little bit here and there. So we have some changes planned for controls, the brakes, the not really the gauges, but I have some work to do there, but things like turn signals and some little aesthetic touches. This is a good example of what might be a resto mod, along with a bike I got out here. So this bad boy is a CB900F, and this is another really cool example of just some awesome retro Honda stuff. So this bike we recently got running, and it's kind of in better shape than we expected. So for this bike, some of the things that we're considering, it doesn't really have original paint, so it's not immaculate in that sense. It's not like it's a super low mileage bike. It's been modified a little bit already in the past with different bars on it, 4-in-1 exhaust, that kind of thing. So for this, it doesn't necessarily make sense to restore it. This one, we want to turn into a resto mod. So this will be an upcoming build. I don't know how much we'll be able to show on the channel, but we have some really fun ideas for this bike. Now, with all that being said, I hope you guys have a better understanding of what the difference is between a restoration versus a recommissioning versus a revival. So Seth and I love pretty much everything two wheels in any condition, and that's why you see the variety that you do on this channel. So I hope you guys have enjoyed the journey so far, because we're not going to stop. So anyway, let me know if you guys have any questions. Check out some other videos on the channel. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I hope to see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.